How did you kill Bridget?
The housekeeper had been cleaning for 2 hours, unaware that there was a crime scene upstairs. Her routine was interrupted when a man came looking for Caleb Harrison, the homeowner, who had yet to show up at work that day. She hadn't seen Caleb and noted that his bedroom door was closed. Together, they went upstairs and found him motionless in bed, the blanket pulled up to his chin, making it look like he was sleeping peacefully. As the ambulance sirens filled the air, the vehicle stopped in front of the grandest house on a tree-lined street in suburban Mississauga. It was just past noon on August 23, 2013. Paramedic Patrick Morin felt a strange familiarity as he looked at the house with its sloped roof and big windows. Turning to his partner, he said, "I've been here before." The paramedics rushed to the master bedroom on the second floor, but it was too late. Caleb Harrison was already gone. Caleb was a 40-year-old dad of 2 who always wore a welcoming smile. Despite some tough times in his past, he had the names of his children tattooed over his heart, a sign of deep love. The night before, under the fading light of a late August sunset, he had been coaching his daughter's softball game in nearby Etobicoke. He drove home alone afterward since his kids, ages 10 and 12, were spending the week with their mother, his ex-wife. The whole family, including Caleb's ex and her new husband, had been together at the game. Back at home, Caleb relaxed with a drink and some TV. Around 11 p.m., after a call to his girlfriend, he turned his phone to silent and settled in for the night. Being a light sleeper, he wore an eye mask and kept a loud fan running in his bedroom to drown out any noise. Now, paramedics and police stood over Caleb's body, noticing signs of a struggle. Bruises and scratches on his neck, swollen knuckles, and deep scratches across his chest. Constable Sonia Mackin, tasked with photographing the crime scene, walked in through the front door and was immediately struck by a sense of déjà vu as she saw the carpeted staircase leading upstairs. She had been here years ago, taking photos of another body at the bottom of these very stairs. Outside, the presence of police cruisers and the fluttering police tape spurred a flurry of phone calls among the community. A neighbor called a family friend, who then called another friend, eventually reaching Elizabeth Gallant, Caleb's aunt, who lived close by. Shaken by the grim rumor she just heard, Gallant couldn't believe it. Overwhelmed and needing answers, she got into her car and drove straight to the Harrison home. Caleb was not the first in his family to die in this house, nor was he the second. Back in April 2010, his mother, 63-year-old Bridget Harrison, was found dead at the bottom of the stairs leading to the room. Just a year before, in the same place, his father, Bill Harrison, found dead at 64.
She did the whole thing of, "Are you sitting down? What are you doing? Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Something happened to Bill." Kind of don't think I believed anything until I saw the ambulance on the street and the fire department and the police not being able to do CPR, and her whole coming home arrival, and it was dark and she couldn't find him at first, and then she found him in the locked bathroom.
His death was thought to be natural until Bridget died in suspicious circumstances, leading the coroner to label both their deaths as undetermined. Now a third mysterious death had occurred. An entire family had been wiped out in the same house. How could this happen? The Harrison family had lived at 3635 Pitch Pine Crescent for nearly 40 years, making it the central gathering spot for family and friends. Caleb's parents, Bill and Bridget Harrison, purchased the home back in 1975, over 10 years after they first fell in love backstage at the Stratford Festival. This house had become more than just a residence. It was a hub of activity, a place where siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends often came together. Bridget was a standout student and a star in local theater productions. Her passion for the arts led her to a pivotal apprenticeship at Stratford's internationally renowned Performing Arts Theater at just 16, where she met William Harrison. Bill was a tall, handsome man who was 2 years her senior and worked in the costume department. He was instantly taken with the petite blonde apprentice. Growing up in Stratford, Bill was immersed in a creative environment. His household was filled with musicians and jazz lovers. His father managed Harrison's Beauty Parlor, a business his great-grandparents had started after escaping slavery in Virginia and journeying to Canada via the Underground Railroad in 1837. In the 1960s, Bill, a black man, and Bridget, a white woman, faced both subtle and overt racism as they dated. Despite these challenges, they remained deeply committed to each other, marrying in 1969 and settling in Mississauga. Bill built a career in sales and management, while Bridget embarked on a distinguished path in education. She worked as a teacher, principal, superintendent, and eventually as a special assistant to the education minister. Bridget became a pioneer in her field, mentoring countless students and educators throughout her career. Her impact was so profound that more than 1,000 people attended her funeral, with half of those present raising their hands when asked if she had influenced their careers. Together, Bridget and Bill were a formidable duo, her vibrant passion perfectly complemented by his calm, steady demeanor. They were known for their warmth and generosity, becoming a beloved fixture in their community. Family members often joked that they could have charged consulting fees for the invaluable advice they provided on education, careers, and relationships. Unable to conceive naturally, Bridget and Bill chose the path of adoption. In 1973, they welcomed Caleb, a delightful 6-month-old baby with chubby cheeks, into their lives. From early on, Caleb was a bundle of energy, always getting into mischief. He was a little rascal, his aunt, Elizabeth Gallant, recalled with a laugh. Caleb faced challenges in school, particularly being teased for his Tourette syndrome. She expected her son to attend school and do well, her brother noted. While Bridget and Caleb deeply loved each other, their strong personalities sometimes clashed. Bill, ever the peacekeeper with his calm demeanor, often acted as the mediator between them, smoothing over tensions and maintaining harmony within the family.
Caleb could push Bridget's buttons, but he could never push Bill's buttons. And so Bill would be the buffer. Bill would be the guy who would, calm Caleb down and calm Bridget down.
9 years before the unsettling series of deaths at Pitch Pine Crescent began, Caleb Harrison's life took a romantic turn when he met his future wife at a doll warehouse. At 27, Caleb was known for his wit and was a delight to be around. He had jumped straight into the workforce after high school, where his methodical, meticulous nature and love for routine led him to thrive in the shipping and receiving industry, just as e-commerce was beginning to boom. In 2000, while working in the shipping department, Caleb found himself captivated by a young woman working at the front desk. Melissa Merritt, 19 at the time, was a quintessential girl. Next door with her animal-loving nature, blushing skin, and highlighted hair. She came from a law enforcement family. Her father was a Toronto police officer, and her brother was set to continue the tradition. As she ended an engagement with her high school boyfriend, who wasn't ready for marriage, Melissa turned her attention to Caleb. She longed for stability. She dreamed of having a home, a husband, and, most importantly, children. Within months of their relationship starting, Caleb excitedly shared with his parents that he and Merritt were planning to start a family soon. Merritt had lost an ovary due to a medical condition, and there was a chance she might need to remove the other, making their window to naturally conceive potentially limited. As someone who was adopted and had faced lingering questions about his own biological origins, Caleb was particularly keen on beginning his family. Within just 3.5 years, the couple had married, had 2 children, and bought a house in Georgetown, a 30-minute drive from their families in Mississauga. However, their relationship began to suffer under financial pressures, the weight of family responsibilities, and Caleb's drinking issues. The couple's domestic situation escalated further when, in June 2005, Merritt called the police to report that Caleb had assaulted her at their home. Caleb was arrested, charged, and eventually convicted of domestic assault. The fallout from their tumultuous relationship was severe. Caleb ended up moving back in with his parents, while Merritt stayed in the house in Georgetown and refused to let Caleb see their children. Not long after, Caleb's life spiraled further out of control. 1 month later, he drove home drunk from a party in Milton and was involved in a tragic accident where he collided head-on with a taxi, resulting in the death of the driver and injuries to 4 young passengers. Bridget and Bill were heartbroken by the incident. Caleb faced serious charges of drunk driving causing death. Despite his own severe injuries from the crash, he was released on bail under the condition that he reside with his parents. Amidst his recovery, another incident occurred involving Merritt. She reported a home invasion to the Halton police, claiming she had been attacked in her own backyard. The police subsequently approached Caleb at his parents' home as a potential suspect. However, as Caleb had been seriously injured in the crash, was unable to walk without crutches, and therefore could not possibly have been involved in the alleged home invasion. During this turbulent period, Merritt reported several more home invasions, but these incidents led to no charges being filed. Despite the serious nature of the allegations, Merritt was never charged. In a pivotal court decision in October 2005, a judge ruled in favor of Caleb having access to his children. He was granted visitation rights on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and every other weekend, under the condition that he continue to comply with his bail terms, which included residing with his parents. This arrangement was intended to ensure some stability for the children and allow Caleb to maintain a presence in their lives while adhering to the legal constraints set upon him. That winter, Merritt's life took a new turn when she met 28-year-old Christopher Fattore online. Standing at 6'4" and built like a linebacker, Fattore was a notable presence. He grew up in an Italian neighborhood in North Toronto, where he completed high school before taking on various jobs. His career path was eclectic. He managed the kitchen at a Hooters, worked as a nightclub bouncer, and also took on jobs as a handyman. In October 2006, Fattore took a significant step by proposing to Merritt on his birthday. As their wedding approached in the spring, they encountered a major complication. Merritt was still legally married to Caleb. Despite this, they proceeded with a ceremonial event. Over the next 5 years, Merritt and Fattore expanded their family, having 4 children together, bringing Merritt's total to 6 children. Merritt admitted to being sporadically employed and horrible at managing money, which often led them to rely on social assistance and financial help from family members to get by. As Merritt embarked on her second marriage, the custody arrangement for her children with Caleb changed significantly. A judge ruled that Caleb would have 50-50 custody, meaning his children would now split their time equally between living at Pitch Pine Crescent with their father and his parents, and with their mother and her new husband in their house in Mississauga. Bill and Bridget, embracing their roles as grandparents, became deeply involved in their grandchildren's lives. They actively participated in driving the kids to school, taking them to various activities and assisting with homework. However, Merritt was not pleased with their involvement. She expressed her discontent in an email to the Harrisons, stating, "If Caleb is not caring for the children, no one other than myself should be." Over the next 2 years, the situation between Merritt and the Harrison family grew increasingly contentious. Merritt made 5 separate claims alleging that Caleb or his parents had assaulted the children. By December 2008, the conflict had escalated to the point where Merritt was preventing the Harrisons from seeing the children at all. In March, Caleb's legal troubles culminated in him beginning an 18-month jail sentence for the drunk driving incident that resulted in a fatality. During his incarceration, the court granted Bridget and Bill the right to fulfill Caleb's share of custody, ensuring the children remained in a stable and familiar environment. Amid financial difficulties and dissatisfaction with the custody agreement, Merritt and Fattore grew increasingly frustrated. In response, they made a drastic decision to leave Mississauga. They planned a sudden move, organizing everything without informing either the Harrisons or their parents of their intentions, aiming to start anew away from the complications and constraints of their current situation. That evening, on April 16, 2009, as Merritt and Fattore made plans to disappear, Bridget Harrison returned home to an unsettling silence. The house was dark as she stepped inside just before 9 p.m. Coming back from a school board meeting, she anticipated seeing her husband at home. Yet, as she entered the foyer, the only sound greeting her was the low hum of the television coming from the living room. A half-eaten takeout meal lay abandoned on the coffee table. "Bill?" she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet house. Bridget received no response. She searched the second floor, but Bill was not in their bedroom. Returning downstairs, she noticed the powder room door was shut. "Bill?" she called again. When there was still no answer, she realized the door was locked. Using a pin, Bridget managed to pick the lock and push the door open, only to find her husband slumped against the far wall on the bathroom floor. Panicking, she dialed 911 immediately.
911, what's your emergency?
My husband, I just came home from work and I found him collapsed on the bathroom floor.
What city do you need the ambulance in?
I beg your pardon?
What city?
Mississauga.
What's the address?
3635 Pitch Pine Crescent.
The 911 operator instructed Bridget to check for any vital signs.
Okay, is your husband awake?
No, he's not. I can't move him. He's wedged against the wall between the toilet and the door and everything.
Just stay on the line, ma'am.
Yeah, I can't move him. He's not breathing.
Okay.
I can tell. Oh my God.
Bill was cold and stiff, and Bridget struggled as she attempted to move his body to better assess him.
He's not breathing.
When the paramedics arrived, they quickly confirmed the grim reality that Bridget had already recognized. Bill was dead. The scene was a heartbreaking moment of realization and despair for Bridget as she grappled with the sudden loss of her husband. At the scene, while speaking with the police, Bridget expressed her concerns about several unusual aspects of the situation. She found it peculiar that the bathroom door, which could be locked from either side, was secured. She wondered why Bill, who was home alone, would feel the need to lock the door. Additionally, she noted that it was odd for the house lights to be off, adding another layer of mystery to the circumstances of her discovery. When coroner Dr. Reuven Girard arrived at the Harrison residence, he began his examination of Bill's body and observed notable abrasions on his neck. These were thin red marks across his throat, which he speculated might have been caused by Bill's necklace, as relayed by a police officer who later testified. To ensure a thorough record, Dr. Girard requested that these marks be documented, prompting officers from Peel's Forensic Identification Services unit to take photographs of the abrasions. Despite these peculiar findings, the locked door and the marks on the neck, the investigators did not immediately deem Bill's death suspicious. They categorized it as sudden and unexplained, which, while concerning, did not inherently suggest foul play. It is not uncommon for individuals to seek the restroom during their final moments, making the bathroom a frequent scene for natural deaths. Despite these initial conclusions, the lack of a definitive cause of death led Dr. Girard to prudently order an autopsy. This decision indicated a degree of caution. Although the death didn't immediately suggest foul play, the absence of clear answers warranted a more thorough examination to understand exactly how and why Bill Harrison died. For Bill Harrison's case, Dr. Timothy Feltus, a pathologist, was tasked with performing the autopsy. He was informed by the coroner that there were no concerns regarding foul play and that the police would not be present at the autopsy to take photographs. This information set the tone for Dr. Feltus's approach to the autopsy, leading him to proceed under the assumption that Bill's death was not suspicious. This situation was exacerbated by the fact that, at the time, Canada lacked its own forensic pathology training program, leading to a severe shortage of qualified forensic pathologists in Ontario. The revelations from the inquiry significantly impacted the field, coinciding with the launch of Canada's first training program in forensic pathology at the University of Toronto. Additionally, these events spurred the establishment of the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service, marking a significant step forward in addressing the deficiencies in the system and improving the quality and reliability of death investigations in the province. This transformation aimed to ensure that forensic pathologists were properly trained and that death investigations were conducted with the highest standards of accuracy and integrity. However, a fundamental issue persisted: the initial assessment and flagging of cases as suspicious. Bill Harrison's death, shrouded in unusual circumstances, should have raised immediate suspicions: a locked bathroom door, abrasions on his neck. Despite these unsettling details, his death was categorized as non-suspicious, bypassing the thorough forensic scrutiny it desperately required. Instead of being sent to the centralized facility in Toronto for a detailed autopsy, the case was dismissed as a natural death, an oversight that may have allowed crucial evidence to slip through the cracks. This glaring gap exemplified the ongoing systemic failures in identifying and prioritizing cases that merited deeper investigation. When Dr. Timothy Feltus conducted Bill's autopsy, his findings painted a disturbing picture that starkly contradicted the initial determination of a natural death. There were no heart abnormalities, no diseases, none of the usual markers of natural causes. Instead, Dr. Feltis uncovered injuries that defied any benign explanation. Neck abrasions, a significant bruise on the scalp, and the most shocking discovery, a fractured sternum. These findings weren't just unusual, they were deeply alarming. Years later, Ontario's chief pathologist would call the fractured sternum an astonishing finding, one that should have sent investigators racing to uncover the truth. In his attempt to piece together the mystery, Dr. Feltis consulted with the coroner. The neck abrasions were tentatively linked to a thin gold chain Bill had worn, suggesting the marks could have been caused by the chain being pulled tight. The fractured sternum, on the other hand, was attributed to a potential accidental fall. Dr. Feltis speculated whether Bill might have struck a sharp corner during a collapse, with the coroner pointing to the bathroom vanity as a plausible culprit. But this theory was built on shaky ground. Dr. Feltis was never provided with police photographs of the scene, critical visual evidence that could have validated or disproved his hypotheses. Without these images, his conclusions were based on incomplete information, leaving room for critical evidence to remain buried and unanswered questions to fester. Ultimately, Dr. Feltis offered a cautious determination. Bill's injuries might have resulted from a sudden collapse due to an acute cardiac arrhythmia, with a subsequent fall causing the trauma to his head and chest. It was a scenario grounded more in possibility than certainty. The fractured sternum, in particular, stood out as a troubling anomaly that did not align with the standard narrative of a natural death. The lack of definitive medical evidence further underscored the challenges of forensic pathology when working in the absence of comprehensive information. For Bridget Harrison, Bill's widow, the autopsy findings were devastating. Seeing the report months later, she was confronted with the unshakable realization that her husband had been a healthy man with no apparent reason to die. Her brother, echoing her disbelief, told police, "The autopsy basically said, here's a healthy human being. There was no reason for him to die." The family's distress was compounded by the stark contrast between the clinical report and the unanswered questions surrounding Bill's demise. As doubts mounted, so did their grief. A painful reminder of the shortcomings in an investigation that failed to look beyond the surface. The unresolved nature of Bill Harrison's death left a chilling legacy, one that would later intertwine with the unraveling tragedies of the Harrison family. The day after the shocking discovery of her husband Bill's lifeless body, Bridget Harrison's world unraveled further when she realized her grandchildren were missing. The truth soon emerged. Melissa Merritt had taken the children, fleeing without warning. For Bridget, this was a terrifying confirmation of her worst fears. Desperate, she turned to the police for help, but their response was frustratingly procedural. They informed her that no legal action could be taken without an updated family court order, delaying any immediate intervention. The bureaucratic hurdles added to Bridget's anguish. Days passed before she could stand before a judge. Finally, on April 23rd, she was granted temporary sole custody of the children, enabling authorities to issue an arrest warrant for Merritt on charges of abduction. Yet, this victory came too late to erase the emotional toll of those harrowing days. On May 6, 2009, Bridget found herself in a police interview room recounting the chaotic and distressing series of events. She explained that her son Caleb was incarcerated, leaving her and Bill as primary caregivers for his children. Merritt's dissatisfaction with the custody arrangement had been brewing, underscored by an email she sent to the Harrisons declaring, "If Caleb is not caring for the children, no one other than myself should be." That email would later serve as a key piece of evidence. As Bridget detailed her sudden and profound loss of Bill, she also recounted the unsettling absence of the children from school the morning after his death.
Sorry about that, dear.
It's okay. On April the 16th of this year, which is just like 3 weeks ago, my husband died. Completely unexpected. Because of the death of my husband, went to school on Friday and found out they weren't in school. We went by the house, all dark, all locked up. Made me nervous.
With no cause of death yet determined for Bill, the situation grew more complex and emotionally fraught. The eerie chain of events hinted at a deeper conspiracy, but investigators failed to connect the dots. The investigation into Bill Harrison's death was hampered by a critical lack of information sharing, a shortfall that would have far-reaching consequences. Dr. Timothy Feltis, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy, was unaware of the broader family dynamics at play when he examined Bill's body. The timing of Melissa Merritt and Christopher Fattore's abrupt departure from Mississauga on the same day of Bill's death was never communicated to him. Had Dr. Feltus been privy to this information, he later admitted, it would have fundamentally altered his approach. Reflecting on the case, he remarked, "If I'd had all the information, I would have done things differently." His admission underscored the devastating impact of fragmented investigations and incomplete communication in death cases. While authorities in Ontario struggled to piece together the truth, Merritt and Fattore embarked on a cross-country escape. Leaving Mississauga behind, they first traveled to Calgary before heading east to Nova Scotia, where they hoped to start over with a lower cost of living. In Nova Scotia, Merritt gave birth to her fourth child, adding another layer of complexity to their already fraught existence as fugitives. Their attempts to stay under the radar seemed calculated. However, despite using aliases to conceal their identities, Fattore made a careless mistake, writing his real name on a rent check. This blunder unraveled their anonymity and set the stage for their eventual capture. It was a small but decisive moment in the unraveling of a conspiracy that had gone unchecked for far too long. Had the connections between Bill Harrison's death, the abduction of the children, and Merritt and Fattore's flight been identified earlier, the investigation might have taken a very different trajectory. Instead, the disjointed approach allowed the fugitives to evade the law temporarily and left the Harrison family grappling with unanswered questions for years. The loss of Bill Harrison cast a long shadow over the Harrison family. He had been a stabilizing force, a calming presence in the midst of family challenges. His absence was felt acutely, especially in the strained relationship between Bridget and Caleb, as grief and stress mounted in the wake of Bill's death. Merritt's release on bail introduced a new layer of tension. The court imposed strict conditions designed to protect her children and enforce legal compliance. But Merritt and Fattore flagrantly disregarded these terms on April 10th, driving to Pitch Pine Crescent and parking near the Harrison home. Though Merritt stayed in the van, Fattore approached Bridget's house under the guise of delivering a letter and photographs for the children. This act, seemingly innocuous, was a direct violation of court orders. The situation escalated when Caleb returned home with the children and spotted Merritt in the van. Alarmed, Bridget immediately called the police. Responding swiftly, officers arrested Merritt for breaching her bail conditions. She spent 3 days in jail, a stark reminder of the chaos her actions had brought to the Harrison family. These events were more than legal disputes or custody battles. They represented the unraveling of a family already stretched to its breaking point. The failures in communication and coordination among investigative bodies allowed critical clues to go unnoticed. Bridget's tireless fight to protect her grandchildren and seek justice for Bill's death exposed a system ill-prepared to handle the complexities of her family's ordeal. Even as the children were returned to Pitch Pine Crescent, the emotional scars remained. Bill's absence continued to ripple through the family, and the ongoing turmoil with Merritt and Fattore loomed large. For the Harrisons, the fight for justice had only just begun, with no guarantees that the system would deliver the answers they so desperately sought. On April 21st, just 1 day before a pivotal abduction hearing, the Harrison residence became the site of yet another tragedy. Caleb Harrison's 8-year-old son returned home from school to a horrifying discovery. His grandmother, Bridget Harrison, lying unresponsive at the bottom of the stairs. Terrified and confused, the young boy ran to a neighbor's house for help, setting off a rapid emergency response. Ambulances and police vehicles once again descended upon the quiet neighborhood, their flashing lights painting a grim tableau eerily reminiscent of Bill Harrison's mysterious death just 1 year earlier. The house, now cordoned off with police tape, had become a site of recurring misfortune. The repeated tragedies, involving 2 senior family members under similarly suspicious circumstances, deepened the air of unease and demanded a more thorough investigation into the Harrison family's ongoing ordeal. Only days before her death, Bridget had submitted a victim impact statement ahead of Melissa Merritt's expected guilty plea in the abduction case. Her statement revealed the excruciating pain and fear she had endured in the wake of Bill's death and the abduction of her grandchildren. Bridget described this period as the most desperate 7.5 months of my life. While she refrained from making direct accusations, her words hinted at a growing unease about the sinister timing of these tragedies. Bridget's death left the family shattered and thrust their story into a deeper realm of unresolved sorrow. Her balancing act as a grieving widow and determined grandmother had come to a sudden, tragic end, leaving behind unanswered questions and a haunting legacy of grief. The peculiar details surrounding Bridget's death immediately raised red flags for her family. Initially deemed a potential accident, the scene told a more troubling story. Caleb Harrison later described his mother's body as lying face up, arms at her sides, her head resting unnaturally on the bottom stair. Her green eyes were open, frozen in a lifeless gaze, a detail that added a chilling element to an already unsettling scene. The family strongly disputed the theory of a simple fall, arguing that the positioning of her body defied such an explanation. As photos of the scene were later displayed during court proceedings, the emotional impact on family members and friends was profound. For them, the unnatural circumstances of her death solidified the belief that Bridget had been the victim of foul play. When coroner Dr. Robert Boyko arrived at the scene, he immediately noted troubling signs of potential violence, abrasions and bruising on Bridget's chin and neck. These observations prompted him to order a full forensic autopsy to be conducted in downtown Toronto, an investigation far more thorough than the one Bill Harrison had received. This decision acknowledged the growing suspicion that foul play might have been involved and offered the hope of finally uncovering the truth behind Bridget's untimely death. As the autopsy findings emerged, the complexity surrounding Bridget's injuries came into focus. Petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, a hallmark of strangulation, clashed with injuries like broken neck bones that could support a fall. The unusual combination left investigators puzzled about the sequence of events leading to her death. The investigation took a darker turn when Dr. Michael Polanen, Ontario's chief forensic pathologist, joined the case. Upon learning that Bridget's death was the second suspicious fatality within the same household, Polanen drew a chilling parallel to Bill Harrison's unexplained injuries. He noted that Bill's fractured sternum and throat abrasions, which had gone largely unexplored, could potentially be connected to foul play. Polanen also highlighted a procedural failure. Bill's autopsy had lacked a layered neck dissection, a critical examination that might have provided key insights into his injuries. Polanen's proposal to exhume Bill's body for further analysis underscored the urgency of re-examining the past in light of these new findings. Tragically, this avenue was closed. Bill had been cremated, leaving only incomplete records and Bridget's autopsy findings to guide investigators. Bridget's death highlighted significant failures in the investigative process. Peel Police policy dictates that suspected homicides should be handled by the Homicide Bureau, whose detectives bring specialized training and expertise to complex cases. Despite the suspicious circumstances of Bridget's death, the case remained with the local Criminal Investigations Bureau instead. The Homicide Bureau's refusal to take over the investigation raised questions about whether all avenues were being properly explored. This decision, shrouded in a lack of transparency, fueled the family's frustration and left critical leads unexplored. Bridget's case, like Bill's before it, risked becoming another unresolved chapter in the Harrison family's tragic saga. Initial suspicions fell on Caleb Harrison, given known tensions between him and his mother. However, Caleb provided a solid alibi. He was at work at the time of her death. With Caleb ruled out, the investigation seemed to lose direction, a common pitfall in cases where initial leads fail to produce results. The Harrison family's suspicions soon turned toward Melissa Merritt and Christopher Fattore. The acrimonious history between the couple and the Harrisons, coupled with the timing of Bridget's death, made them persons of interest. Caleb himself urged police to investigate their whereabouts on the day of his mother's death. When questioned, Merritt claimed she had been at home running a daycare with Fattore, providing an alibi that added another layer of complexity to the investigation. Verifying her story and tracing her movements would prove critical in uncovering the truth behind Bridget's death. A truth that remained agonizingly out of reach as the case unfolded.
I think it's weird that she passed away like a week after Bill. Like it was almost like a week between the anniversary of I don't know what you call it, but say the anniversary of Bill passing away. He had passed away for 1 year, and then I think it was almost like a week later that she had passed away. I think that's odd. But, you know, you kind of then when you start thinking about it, it's like, well, it was a year anniversary since her husband passed away. Maybe, you know, like I said, I've heard that stress killed. I've heard, you know, like it can kill you. It can just eat away at your body or whatever. I've been told that because I've been stressed out, you know, since my kids were taken from me, and my doctor's like, you need to take it easy, like, because it'll kill you. Like, I have ulcers now that I'm on medication for. No, like, and again, I don't know how she died. I don't know what she looked like. I don't know if she was assaulted. I don't know if she looked I don't know anything about that. So I don't want to be making any assumptions that he beat the hell out of her and she died, because I don't know. Like, I don't know what she looked like. You know, like if, you know, her face was all bashed in, then maybe it would be a little bit more stronger of a thought.
Bridget Harrison's death presented a complex puzzle for investigators, one that demanded a delicate balance between following family suspicions and establishing concrete evidence. However, the investigation's limitations soon became apparent. Christopher Fattore, one of the primary suspects, provided an alibi that required scrutiny. He claimed to have been running errands and working in his backyard on the day of Bridget's death. Surveillance footage from a local Sobeys corroborated part of his account, placing him at the store. Yet, a critical component of his story, picking up a drum kit from Merritt's grandmother's house, remained unverified. Police failed to interview Merritt's grandmother, missing an opportunity to either confirm or challenge the credibility of Fattore's timeline. This oversight left significant gaps in the reconstruction of his whereabouts during the critical window of time. The investigation into Bridget's death spanned a mere 2 weeks before it was shelved, a startlingly short time frame given the case's complexity and gravity. Months later, authorities officially closed the case, citing insufficient evidence to determine foul play. Yet, the lingering questions surrounding her neck injuries, petechial hemorrhaging, and ambiguous cause of death pointed to an incomplete picture. At a final case conference, forensic pathologists presented multiple possible explanations for Bridget's injuries. The findings were conflicting. Signs of potential strangulation were juxtaposed with injuries consistent with an accidental fall. This duality created a fundamental challenge in determining the manner of death. Dr. Michael Pickup, who conducted the autopsy, concluded that neck injuries were the cause of death but could not definitively classify it as homicide or an accident. His candid acknowledgement that the case cannot hinge on the pathology alone highlighted a critical aspect of death investigations: the need for corroborating evidence from the scene, witnesses, and other investigative leads to form a complete narrative. For Bridget's family, the lack of resolution was devastating. Bill's sister, Elizabeth Gallant, expressed deep frustration over the investigative shortcomings. To her, the inconclusive findings from the autopsy should have prompted an intensified police effort, not a premature closure. Instead, the reliance on limited medical conclusions left the family's concerns unaddressed. Gallant's interactions with Constable Boyer underscored a troubling dynamic. Families, already burdened by grief, often feel they must gather evidence themselves to prompt further investigation. This misunderstanding of law enforcement's role highlighted systemic issues, where the onus appeared to shift unfairly onto the victims' families rather than the investigative team. The final determination that Bridget died of asphyxia with an unknown mechanism of death only deepened the mystery. The ambiguity surrounding her neck injuries, which bore hallmarks of foul play, should have prompted additional inquiry. Instead, the case was quietly closed in 2010, leaving the Harrisons to grapple with the unresolved tragedy. This failure to thoroughly explore all possibilities not only denied the family closure, but also represented a missed opportunity to uncover the truth. The procedural missteps in Bridget's investigation illuminated broader issues in law enforcement training and the critical need for officers to recognize and interpret nuanced medical evidence, especially in cases of unexplained injuries or suspicious deaths. The Harrison family's grief was compounded by the knowledge that key evidence had been overlooked and critical leads had gone unexplored. The premature closure of the case left them haunted by what might have been discovered if the investigation had been as relentless as their pursuit of justice. But before they could heal properly, tragedy struck again. On August 23, 2013, Elizabeth Gallant arrived at Pitch Pine Crescent to a scene all too familiar. Another life lost, another home surrounded by police tape. This time, it was Caleb Harrison, found dead in his home. The sight of yellow tape cordoning off the property, a now recurring symbol of misfortune, underscored the family's cascading tragedies. What was once a quiet suburban street had become a haunting reminder of loss and unanswered questions. Elizabeth, the steadfast presence during the family's prior losses, now faced the heartbreaking reality of Caleb's death. Her role as a source of comfort and strength became more significant than ever, as she shouldered the weight of yet another devastating blow to her family. For the community, this death was a breaking point. Cries of, "How could you let this happen?" directed at the police reflected not just sorrow but frustration. Many questioned the handling of the earlier Harrison family deaths, believing the tragedies could have been prevented if the investigations had been more thorough. Determined not to repeat past mistakes, police launched an intensive investigation into Caleb's death. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing neighbors, seeking witnesses, and collecting video surveillance. Every possible avenue was explored in an attempt to piece together the events leading to Caleb's demise. The renewed police efforts signaled a significant shift. Acknowledging their previous failures, law enforcement committed to uncovering the truth, not just for Caleb, but for the entire Harrison family. This case marked a critical moment in restoring public trust and ensuring justice for the family. Caleb's autopsy provided the breakthrough the investigation needed. The revelation that he likely died from strangulation shifted the focus to a possible homicide, forcing the homicide squad to reassess the previous Harrison deaths. The injuries and timing of Caleb's death demanded a deeper exploration of motive and opportunity. Detective Sergeant Cowan addressed the complexities of the investigation, referring to the case as a cold case requiring painstaking reconstruction. The lack of rigor in earlier leads left the team with a monumental challenge, but the late involvement of the homicide squad brought renewed hope for resolving the series of tragedies. But while this was ongoing, another problem arose. What was to become of the kids? After Merritt's guilty plea to child abduction following Bridget's death, Caleb was granted sole custody. Merritt retained visitation rights every second weekend, preserving her bond with the children. In the summer of 2013, Caleb demonstrated remarkable flexibility by agreeing to a temporary custody arrangement, allowing the children to alternate weeks with their mother. This decision reflected his willingness to prioritize the children's relationships, even in the face of underlying tension. However, the custody battle reignited when Merritt filed for shared custody, accusing Caleb of manipulating child support demands to control the arrangement. Caleb's silence on the application indicated his reluctance to alter the existing agreement, believing it was best for the children. When Caleb was killed, the timing was deeply suspicious. His death coincided with the custody schedule reverting to limited access for Merritt, raising questions about motives linked to their contentious relationship. The intersection of custody disputes, financial tension, and past accusations created a volatile backdrop to the unfolding tragedy. Caleb's death not only ended the custody battle but left his children without their father, further destabilizing an already fragile family dynamic. For the Harrison family, the loss of Caleb was yet another chapter in an unrelenting saga of heartbreak and unanswered questions. As investigators worked to uncover the truth, the children, caught in the crossfire of a fractured family, faced a future forever shaped by the tragedies that had engulfed their lives. Following Caleb Harrison's death, Melissa Merritt wasted no time in filing for sole custody of their children. Just 2 weeks after the tragic event, Merritt submitted her application, describing Caleb's death as tragic and very shocking. This characterization seemed calculated to position herself as a grieving ex-partner, potentially swaying the court's perception in her favor. The custody application was successful, and Merritt was granted full guardianship of the children. With her newfound legal authority, Merritt and her partner, Christopher Fattore, quickly relocated with all 6 children to the East Coast. Their move to Nova Scotia appeared to be a calculated attempt to start fresh. However, their every step was closely monitored by law enforcement, hinting at the growing suspicions surrounding their involvement in the Harrison family's tragic saga. The tense atmosphere of surveillance led to action on a bleak January morning in 2014. Half a dozen police vehicles descended on a secluded house in Italy Cross, Nova Scotia, where Merritt and Fattore had lived since November. Officers quickly apprehended the couple, charging them with the first-degree murders of both Caleb and Bridget Harrison. As Christopher Fattore and Melissa Merritt faced the detectives, the evidence against them was piling up, leaving little room for doubt. Cell phone records were placed near the Harrison home at critical times. And then there was the forensic evidence, proof that tied them directly to the murders. At first, Fattore tried to stay quiet, his face stiff and unreadable, while Merritt lashed out, denying everything and deflecting every question. But the detectives weren't giving up. They laid out the evidence piece by piece, slowly boxing the couple into a corner they couldn't escape from. As the hours dragged on, Fattore began to crack. The detective's tone shifted, less aggressive and more probing, painting a picture of the family that had been destroyed and the lives that had been stolen. The weight of guilt and exhaustion started to show in Fattore's posture. His head hung low, his shoulders slumped. Finally, after hours of relentless questioning, he couldn't hold it in anymore. His voice shook as he confessed, piece by piece, revealing the terrible truth. The details painted a horrifying picture of what had happened. His confession shattered any hope of innocence and confirmed the devastating betrayal that tore the Harrison family apart.
I killed Harrison. I didn't like the way he treated my kids. I didn't like hearing all the horrific stories. It was an awful family. They treated the children like shit. And I and Melissa had to live with it every day, and I couldn't watch Melissa's attitude and how sorry she was for everything that was going on.
Head in his hands, Fattore recounted the events of April 2010 under the pretense of delivering a note for the children. He approached the Harrison residence. When Bridget answered the door, he forced his way inside and launched a brutal attack. "I hit her a couple of times," he admitted. His voice cracked as he confessed. "I then proceeded to squeeze her neck." Tears streamed down his face as he continued, until she stopped breathing and lay on the floor.
What did you do?
I killed Bridget Harrison and killed Harrison.
How did you kill Bridget?
I knocked on her door. She opened the door. I pretended to have a letter to give to the children. She refused the letter, so I then forced my way into the house and I attacked her.
What did you do?
I hit her a couple times. I then proceeded to squeeze her neck. Until she stopped breathing and laid on the floor. I never meant to find her. I never meant to find her. That's not the plan. That's not what I wanted. I figured that someone would come home or Caleb would come home and find her. I didn't expect for to come to the house. I didn't think that was going to happen.
Fattore explained his reasoning behind the murder. He believed that eliminating Bridget would help Merritt gain an advantage in her custody battle with Caleb. Despite this claim, he insisted that Merritt had no role in planning or carrying out the crime. Fattore's assertion that Merritt was uninvolved appeared to be a deliberate effort to shield her from culpability. While this statement could significantly impact Merritt's legal case, it raised critical questions about its validity. Given that Fattore's actions were explicitly tied to the custody dispute, investigators scrutinized whether Merritt may have known about or even encouraged the plan, regardless of his claim to the contrary.
And I'm telling you right now that Melissa Merritt did not know anything until after it was done.
Fattore's confession to Bridget's murder marked a turning point in the case, revealing the premeditated nature of the violence that had torn through the Harrison family. 3 years after Bridget's death, Fattore returned to Pitch Pine Crescent under the cover of darkness. Dressed in black gloves, a hoodie, and shoes purchased from Walmart, he armed himself with a baseball bat. Using a key stolen from Caleb's son, he entered the house, guided only by the hum of a bedroom fan. Upon finding Caleb, Fattore struck him in the chest with the bat. Although Caleb's sudden reaction caught him off guard, Fattore quickly regained control, throwing Caleb into a shelving unit before strangling him.
I laughed and went there. I got into his house. Proceeded to go up to the bedroom. I hit him in the chest. And when he sprung up, we began to struggle. I threw him into the shelving unit beside his bed. He tried to bribe me with money. I didn't speak to him. I just knocked him to the ground and I proceeded to choke him.
Despite admitting to these gruesome details, Fattore maintained that Merritt was unaware of his plans until after the murder.
And as for Caleb, I snuck out in the middle of the night. Also had no idea.
This assertion became a key element of his defense, aiming to distance Merritt from the crimes. However, given the couple's history and the intertwined nature of their lives, the credibility of this claim was heavily scrutinized during legal proceedings. The insistence on Merritt's ignorance of the murders formed a central part of Fattore's defense. Yet, police remained unconvinced. Their belief in Merritt's involvement stemmed from her intimate connection with Fattore and the shared context of their relationship. The dynamic between the two, coupled with the calculated nature of the crimes, suggested that Merritt's role might have extended beyond Fattore's narrative. Fattore's confession, while illuminating, left critical questions unanswered. As the investigation unfolded, authorities sought to uncover the full extent of both individuals' involvement, piecing together a chilling story of betrayal, violence, and fractured family ties. The aftermath of Caleb Harrison's murder unraveled new layers of evidence and suspicion. In their hasty move from Mississauga, Melissa Merritt and Christopher Fattore left behind several belongings, including a laptop brimming with incriminating internet searches. These searches, discovered in a trailer too dilapidated for travel, provided a chilling glimpse into a calculated plan. The evidence, however, raised questions about why police had not secured search warrants earlier, specifically after Bridget Harrison's death, potentially missing key opportunities to uncover the couple's intentions. Among the most damning searches: 2 months before Bridget's murder, what if a grandparent has legal custody and they die? 3 weeks before Bridget's murder, how long does it take to die from choking? And how long does it take for a person being strangled to pass out? The month before Caleb's murder, easy ways to kill and get away with it. The laptop's contents were a treasure trove for investigators, yet they posed significant challenges. Both Merritt and Fattore had access to the computer, making it difficult to attribute specific searches to either individual. Police sought to link the queries to activities in their email accounts to pinpoint the user. However, unauthorized searches and seizures of digital evidence during the investigation complicated its admissibility, highlighting procedural missteps that added layers of complexity to the case. Police, determined to strengthen their case, moved strategically. Days after Fattore's confession, officers placed Merritt and Fattore in a room at Halifax Airport, allowing the couple to converse under the false impression they were alone. For 3 hours, their whispered conversation was recorded, a crucial piece of evidence later introduced at trial. This, combined with months of intercepted communications from their Italy Cross home, painted a detailed picture of their relationship and potential complicity. As the door closed behind them, Fattore began, "I'm taking the rap for it, to give you an accessory after the fact." Merritt's response revealed a telling concern. "They called me Karla Homolka," referencing the infamous Canadian accomplice to murder. The comparison underscored how Merritt's involvement was viewed by authorities and the public alike. During pre-trial motions, Merritt's defense team argued that police had conducted unauthorized searches and attempted to conceal these actions, while prosecutors insisted the missteps were honest errors amid a complex investigation. Superior Court Justice Fletcher Dawson sided with the defense, identifying instances of police misconduct and efforts to obscure them. Despite this, Justice Dawson acknowledged the importance of the internet searches, particularly queries like, if a grandparent has legal custody and they die, which of the parents gets the kids? He noted the searches likely pointed to Merritt as the planner, given their timing and specificity. On September 27, 2017, the trial began. After 4 years in custody, Melissa Merritt appeared diminished. Her once polished demeanor was replaced by a frail figure with long, dark hair and a loose-fitting pantsuit. Dwarfed behind the plexiglass of the witness box, she clutched a tissue and tearfully pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors Eric Taylor and Brian McGuire presented a compelling narrative linking the custody battle to the deaths of Bill, Bridget, and Caleb Harrison. They argued that Merritt and Fattore had conspired to eliminate the obstacles in Merritt's custody fight, with Fattore carrying out the murders. She was not just an accessory after the fact, Taylor stated, directly countering the anticipated defense argument. While Fattore faced charges of first-degree murder for Bridget and Caleb and second-degree murder for Bill, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. In a strategic move, Fattore attempted to plead guilty to manslaughter in Caleb's case, citing a lack of intent to kill. The Crown, confident in its case, rejected the plea. During testimony, Fattore claimed his confessions were coerced by his concern for his family, believing a deal would secure Merritt's release to care for their children. He denied involvement in Bridget's death and maintained he only intended to rough up Caleb to buy more time with the children. His assertion of no involvement in Bill's death aligned with his claim of affinity for the patriarch, complicating the jury's perception of his motives. Circumstantial evidence against Merritt. The case against Merritt relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors argued that Fattore's actions were impossible without Merritt's knowledge and support. They highlighted her potential role in driving Fattore to purchase the shoes he wore during Caleb's murder, a key detail omitted from their police statements. The intercepted conversations added weight to the case. In one exchange, Merritt told Fattore, "You shouldn't have said anything to them," followed by a muffled comment and, "The audio tapes would have fed us anyways." Prosecutors interpreted this as an admission of guilt, while the defense argued it reflected their perception of police bias rather than their culpability. While the custody battle remained central to the Crown's argument, prosecutors added another layer: financial gain. They alleged Merritt and Fattore believed they would inherit millions from the Harrison estate, further motivating their actions. This theory painted a picture of greed intertwined with family betrayal. The physical evidence against Fattore was damning. Caleb's DNA was found under Fattore's fingernails, and gloves containing both their DNA were discovered in Fattore's trash. The Walmart shoes purchased shortly before the murder were also recovered, linking Fattore directly to the crime scene. Dr. Michael Pullinan, a key forensic witness, testified that Bill Harrison likely suffered blows to the head and chest before his death. Although inconclusive, Pullinan's testimony suggested violence rather than natural causes. Conversely, a defense expert proposed Bill's fractured sternum resulted from CPR, a claim contradicted by ambulance records stating no CPR had been performed. Ultimately, the trial of Melissa Merritt and Christopher Fattore highlighted the intricate intersections of motive, evidence, and legal strategy. The prosecution's case, bolstered by digital evidence, forensic findings, and intercepted conversations, painted a chilling picture of a calculated plot to reshape custody dynamics at the cost of human life. Yet, Merritt's defense skillfully exploited gaps in direct evidence, leaving the jury with the challenge of navigating a web of circumstantial implications and contested narratives. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as the jury foreman delivered the long-awaited verdicts on a freezing January afternoon. The whispers carried weight far beyond their volume, as everyone leaned forward to catch each word. The outcomes of years of pain, loss, and unanswered questions now hung in the balance. Christopher Fattore was found guilty of murdering Caleb and Bridget Harrison, but acquitted of Bill Harrison's murder. Melissa Merritt was convicted of Caleb's murder, though the jury could not reach a consensus on her involvement in Bridget's death, resulting in a mistrial. The Crown subsequently issued a stay of proceedings on the latter charge, Both Merritt and Fattore announced their intention to appeal their convictions and received life sentences, each without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Fattore's sentences for the murders of Caleb and Bridget will be served concurrently. Dr. Timothy Feltis, the pathologist who had conducted Bill Harrison's autopsy, reflected on his role with a heavy heart in a post-trial interview. He acknowledged the critical missed opportunities during the initial investigation. "The broken sternum should have twigged me that something wasn't right," he admitted. With years of hindsight, Feltis now suspects that Bill was the victim of foul play, though he maintained that his conclusions at the time were based on the information available. "I could have done things differently, but I can't change it now," he said, a sentiment that added yet another layer of complexity to an already tragic case. At the sentencing hearing, 25 family members and close friends packed the courtroom, standing as a united front. Their victim impact statements painted a harrowing picture of loss, trauma, and shattered bonds. They described the ripple effects of the murders, which had not only fractured their family but left emotional scars that would never fully heal. Depression, anger, and violent nightmares plagued the surviving relatives, haunted by graphic images of autopsy photos and imagined visions of their loved ones' final moments. The testimony illuminated the depth of pain inflicted on the Harrison family, leaving a courtroom gripped with collective grief. The Harrison family home at 3635 Pitchpine Crescent, once a hub of love and connection, became a tragic monument to their losses. It was sold and completely renovated by its new owners, erasing all physical traces of the family who once called it home. For the surviving Harrisons, the home's disappearance symbolized the end of an era and the irreplaceable void left by Bill, Bridget, and Caleb. A shared sense of guilt and regret lingered among the family members. Many wished they had pushed harder for answers from authorities, whose initial dismissals had left critical questions unresolved. Some expressed fears for their safety, concerned about Merritt's potential influence from prison and the impact she might still have on her children, deepening the divisions within the fractured family. Over 5 years, Caleb Harrison's children endured a series of unthinkable losses. First, their papa, then their nana, and finally, their father. Adding to this devastating sequence of events, they witnessed their mother, Melissa Merritt, arrested and later convicted of murder. Despite Caleb's explicit wish in his will for his cousin to assume guardianship, the children were not placed with the Harrison side of the family. Their current guardians remain unidentified, their identities shielded to protect their privacy. On the final day of the court proceedings, the surviving Harrison family members stood together in silence as Merritt and Fattore were led away by police. The verdicts, while offering a semblance of justice, could not erase the scars left by the murders of Bill, Bridget, and Caleb. Yet, the family's resolve remained unbroken. They stood united in their determination to seek accountability for the systemic failures they believed had contributed to these tragedies. "We're not going to back down because we don't want this to happen to any other family," said Doug Blackwell, Bridget's brother, a sentiment that encapsulated the family's enduring fight for justice and closure. Following the tragic saga of the Harrison family, justice came at a heavy cost, but hope prevailed in their determination to prevent such tragedies from befalling others. Yet, stories of resilience and survival take many forms. In our next video, discover how a 15-year-old girl outsmarted a serial killer, escaping his grasp after a harrowing 18 hours. Her bravery not only saved her life, but led to the capture of a predator. Click on the next video to witness Kara Robinson's incredible story of courage and survival.